Most of us grumble about our paychecks, whether we work as teachers, software engineers, business executives, or as journalists. Now, there's news that will make many of you nod your head in agreement. You have to hold your breath for this. A new report says that CEOs in India earn 229 times more than an average employee in the same company. Many of us are already calculating what that will mean. Well, we did some of that math for you. Basically, if the average salary of an employee in a company is 20,000 rupees every month, then the CEO of that company earns a little more than 45 lakh rupees. Annually, that would translate into 240,000 rupees for the average employee as opposed to nearly 6 crores for the CEO. The pay gap ratio was found by a Bloomberg analysis that used benchmark stock indices in 22 nations. These are CEOs of companies listed in India's Sensex. This is the biggest gap worldwide after the United States' ratio of 265, according to a separate Bloomberg ranking. Norway and Austria have among the smallest margins, and CEOs of companies in the Norwegian OBX index got on average $1.28 million, roughly equal to the income generated by 20 people. And joining me this evening to help us understand some of that mathematics is Timothy Quigley. He's an associate professor at the Department of Management at the University of Georgia. Professor Quigley, thanks very much for taking out the time to speak with us here at WION. For me, the most interesting part of this analysis is that you have a developed country like the United States, which has a huge income gap between CEOs and the average income of employees. And then next up is India. Which isn't considered, let's say, one of the most developed countries as far as, when you look at all things considered. Can you help us understand what this mathematics actually means for the average person such as me?
Oh, sure. I think it's an important societal question that we all have to think about and ask ourselves whether we are happy about this, right? But I also think, putting that issue aside, we also have to look at the math and the numbers, which you pointed out, and recognize that this study by my friend at Bloomberg really focuses on just the largest companies. So we're looking at, in the case of India, I believe it's just 30 companies, the 30 largest companies on the Sensex. In the U.S., it's the S&P 500. While it's indicative of perhaps pay ratios, it doesn't reflect sort of the ratios at every company across the country, but it's still an important question we have to ask ourselves whether we're happy about this politically, as a society and whatnot.
Does India's population have to be taken into consideration, even though we're looking at just 30 companies in India as far as the Sensex goes? But usually India is a more labor-intensive market. We do have more employees, perhaps on average, when compared to a country like the United States.
Yeah, I think certainly the dynamics of the labor market factor into this a lot. If you think about in the U.S., the average pay of a U.S. worker is, the minimum wage of a U.S. worker is just over $7 an hour. I believe in India it's somewhere less than 50 cents an hour, an equivalent to U.S. dollars. And it's certainly the pool of available labor force and the type of work that's being done here in the U.S. versus India certainly factors into this. And just in issues of labor availability, unemployment rates, things like that. And I know the official reported statistics in India suggest that the unemployment rate is quite low, but when we look at the amount of work actually being done by somebody who's considered employed, that may suggest that there's quite a large labor pool available in India versus the U.S., which can only do negative things to the average wage of a worker.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people will find echo in that analysis. Stay with me a second, Professor Quigley. In fact, in July this year, a huge pay gap between CEOs and other employees at Indian companies had come to the fore. This was on the basis of a study ordered by market regulator SEBI. That study found that blue chip firms gave their top executives salary packages of up to 1,200 times of the average employees' remunerations. As per the findings of that study reported by the PTI, the Bharti Airtel chairman Sunil Bharti Mittal, India's largest telecom operator, Airtel's MD and CEO took home an annual pay package of 30.1 crore rupees for the period of 2016-2017. Airtel's management earned 366 times more than its other employees in the same year. The report said that these were some of the findings that came out of it. Bajaj Auto's MD, Rajiv Bajaj, now interesting figures there as well. The employees earned 522 times lesser than its higher management. Bajaj himself took home a salary of 25.59 crore rupees in the financial year 17. Meanwhile, the Hero MotoCorp chairman, Pawan Munjal, one of the highest paid chairmen on the list, his annual package was reported at 59.66 crore rupees in the financial year 17. The company's higher management earned, get this, 731 times more than its regular employees. All right, let me go back to Professor Quigley for more on that. Professor Quigley, I don't want to get into the specifics of some of these companies in India, but interestingly also are countries like Sweden, where it seems that the disparity in income is far lesser. Once again, do you think societal considerations need to be taken into, or at least looked at when we're understanding the numbers that have come out of some Scandinavian countries?
Oh, certainly. I mean, I think there's actually some great work that's been done by a colleague of mine at Notre Dame that has looked at this across the globe. And one of the ideas is that sort of cultural differences, institutional differences can have a great impact on sort of how much we are willing to pay our top executives. And so if we look at issues like the tolerance for ambiguity inside of a culture, or the individualism versus collectivism of a culture, sort of how important we think individuals are, or what we think about the collective good of our society, are all going to drive our willingness, or what the norms are for pay. And so a country like, say, Norway, for example, which has about the same absolute pay level as the CEO in India, but on this report, but their ratio relative to other employees in their country, it's much, much closer, right? Because they value the collective, they pay their workers a fair bit more. Now, of course, the work is being done is a bit different as well.
Absolutely. Do you think a parallel analysis on a gender pay gap would also be rather interesting to look at when we're looking at some of these countries? Because I think the numbers might just be further skewed if one were to look at the disparity in incomes earned by men and women.
Oh, sure. Well, we know that, I think the popular number bandied about here in the U.S. is, a woman is paid 80, 85 cents on the dollar compared to a man in the same position. And there's lots of argument and debate about the precision of that number, but I think we can all agree women are paid less. And so I think if you applied this, you'd see an even greater gap between the CEO and the average pay of a woman versus the average pay of a male employee, certainly.
Professor Quigley, we leave it at that. Thanks very much for joining us and helping us make sense of all those numbers, and in many ways, I think confirming some of the doubts that a number of employees in this country already had about the pay gap.